A lot of us, we have good intentions and we're in situations that we want to see change happen, but we just don't know how to get there. It's like seeing the door, not being able to get through the door. So, shifting and making cultural changes is really at the forefront of empowering people, making opportunities for people to feel empowered and to find their own empowerment. So, for me, it's about extending the hand, extending the kindness, understanding, listening to understand, first of all, and hoping that kindness and generosity and humanitarianism can help bring unity. For me, it's about unity. So
Mhm.
courage and unity, I think, go together. Sometimes when we're alone, we're weak, we feel weak, but together we can be strong.
Amen to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. Unity, and when I think of unity, I also think of strength,
Yeah.
right? Unity and strength,
Yeah.
they go together. So you're absolutely right. It does that. That's what shifting
It's
culture
forming
is
that
about.
chain, right? Making
Yeah.
that stronger bond.
Mhm.
Sometimes they say the chains that bind you. Well, it can also
Mhm.
be the chains that hold you together. So
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
a healthier perspective about uh, how to unify might be more encouraging than, just
Yeah.
reading passive affirmations or whatever is action. Take action,
Mhm.
listen. I think that's how change comes to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and even on that note about taking action, so you've lived through situations where you spoke up about some really important things, and it came with real risk. You took action, you spoke up, but you knew it was risky. How did you learn the difference between reckless boldness and grounded boldness to be able to take that type of action?
Um, I really had to feel strong to do the things that I did, and that didn't come easy. It was a lot of soul searching. It was a lot of trust and faith in myself, not to mention God. I wanted some support, and at the time, I didn't have parents. I didn't have a strong social network that I could rely on. So
Mhm.
being in an abusive relationship taught me to watch and listen, watch for the opportunities, take them when you can get them, and make the most of them when you do. And I think that just taking those small steps every day towards that door gave me the strength that I needed to finally get to the door, open the door, and get through the door. So I watched and I learned, I trusted in myself, I trusted the process,
Mhm.
and inevitably it saved me.
Wow. Many people, they want to do the right thing, Kelly,
Yeah.
but they are so fearful of the backlash and the ramifications. And so they don't. And I just heard you say that it's about taking the small step. How do you
Mhm.
begin, though, to take those small steps, the safe steps toward truth? Because you're taking the small step, but you have to make sure that it's also is a safe step, right? Toward
Right.
truth, and then when the stakes feel so high, but you still have to take it, and that's where
Yeah.
that to me, it's not just about taking the small step, but make sure this is safe. It's safe for you in that moment.
hmm I think we all have that survival instinct, obviously. And whether it's at a job that we don't like, speaking against the authoritative figure, or it's an abusive relationship, or it's fighting human trafficking. I think it all comes down to operating within a scope that makes you feel comfortable. Not everybody's first step is going to be the same. So I
Mhm.
think you have to find those little nuggets of safety where you can and
Right.
just leapfrog it to the door, you know? So, and that's what I did. I reached out when I could. I confided in people that I could trust or I thought I could trust. And where there's a will, there's a way. And that in itself opened doors. And I think that's one of the things that we have to know is that just by taking the small intentional action opens the opportunity. You don't have to know how you get there step by step because
Mhm.
all will be revealed once you take that intentional step. Then opportunities present themselves, and they kept presenting themselves, and I kept trusting and taking the opportunities where I could, and eventually was able to make some changes. And that's when you feel like, okay, I can do this again. And the more you do it, the more it reaffirms that, and you build your confidence in that. And you build your confidence in yourself. And I think that's one of the lessons about all these hardships is building that confidence in yourself.
Yeah, spot on. No, you mentioned about human trafficking, and I knew that uh, when we spoke before, we talked about that, and I wanted to get into a little bit here again today because
Mhm.
I know that took courage. To me, that's courage in action. That's a bold move. You were a
Yeah,
part of uncovering one of the largest human trafficking networks in Texas. What
yeah.
was a turning point when you knew you couldn't stay quiet anymore?
Well, the turning point for me after seeing all the signs and all the signals and trying to bring awareness, just like pointing things out to the people that should know. And I came across an opportunity to I went to work one day on a Saturday, and there was a young Asian girl, 8 years old, that had been at this office complex all night. And typically, the protocol was they would get there at about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. They would get dropped off, and they may or may not get picked up that evening. If they did, it was usually about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And believe me, I know because I stayed and watched. But I pulled up and she was crouched down out in front of the suite and she was crying, just sobbing, just tears, red face, snot coming out of her nose. I mean, she was having a bad day. And my heart just fell. I thought, where are your parents? It's Saturday morning at, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. You should be at home watching Scooby Doo or some cartoon with some cereal or something. You should not be here and in this state. Where's the adult? So I decided that I was going to go over and check on her and at least check and make sure she was okay. So I got out of my car and I got about halfway across the parking lot and she looked up and she saw me. And the recognition in her eyes instantly turned to fear. And she turned around and she went in and she locked the door. And all the banging and consoling that I could do wouldn't bring her out. So I went back to my office and I just sat there and I cried and I felt like, does anybody know she's here? Does anybody care? I know other people have seen it. I'm not the only one in this office complex. Why isn't somebody doing something? And then I heard, if you don't do it, who's going to? And I thought to myself, being an only child and an only grandchild and not having any living family, not being connected to anybody, who would come looking for me? You know? So I knew then that I was going to have to step out of my comfort zone and I was going to have those hard conversations and I was going to have to be that person that was going to have to take it to some people and point out that this isn't right. This needs to be rectified. Somebody needs to take responsibility here. And that's when I started, letting people know that, okay, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to be the one to do it. Y'all can either get behind me and support me or not, but this is going to happen. And it was a long, hard fight, but I believe in the end we made some difference, and that's okay. It still goes on, but at least when my time came to serve, I stood up and I did the right thing.
Absolutely. And that's the boldness that I talk about. It's not about you using a bullhorn and said, "Oh, look what I'm doing. I'm making a change or I'm making a difference. I'm shifting culture. I
Mhm.
am helping this young lady." But you use your voice, and although quiet, you were bold in what you did. You took that bold step, although it may have seemed small, but it led to something greater because you saved lives in that moment. You could have not, you could have kept quiet. You could have minded your own business like others told you to, but you did not. You went for it. You stepped out of
Mhm.
your comfort zone. And for that, I commend you.
Well,
Uh,
thank you.
because again, your voice changed lives and most likely saved some lives. Even though it continues on today, it's
It
okay, but you
it's
made
not
a
easy for
difference.
some of us to stay in our own lane.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you see something wrong, there are some people, I don't know what the term is, Karens or whatever, and they have to butt their nose into other business, but that's not me. I will stay in my own lane and I will operate within my scope of practice.
Mhm.
But when I see people hurting and it can
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
changed, what are we doing? If we're not helping each other have better
Right.
lives and have safety, that should be paramount to everything. Everybody
Mhm.
should feel safe, especially an 8-year-old girl. I
Absolutely.
can't live with myself after that. I mean, who could?
Mhm.
Obviously, a lot of people, because there wasn't one person in that whole shopping center that was willing to start it. Now, there was one after that helped me, and he was a retired DPS officer. So he had some contacts, but like I said, reaching out, if I had never confided in him, he would have made comments to his friends and he would have, thought that that was bad, practice. And I think he even told me at some point he would go to the store and buy, like fresh fruit and food for them because they were there all day and they didn't have any food. So he would get food and take it over and leave it at the door for them. But we were the only two people that were willing to just help another human.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I don't know how those people did it. That talk about courage, being in a foreign country, not speaking the language, not knowing where you're at, not having communications with, the outside world, food, basic necessities,
Mhm.
that's courage. And that inspired me because if they could go through that, then I could stand up and at least say, "Hey, this isn't right."
Yeah. Absolutely. uh we talk about courage in action. That's what exposes that type of darkness, because in that dark
Mhm.
place you brought light. And for the boldness part of it, I've often heard, "Joe, what is unrestrained boldness?" It's that what you just described. You didn't need permission. It's boldness without permission, without restrictions. You
Mhm.
didn't restrict yourself and you didn't let anyone restrict you. That's
Yeah,
bold.
I think one of the things that helped me too was to think about the people that I was going to have to go up against, the people that I was going to have to take the fight to, and realize who the opponent was and how they think and what really mattered to them at the end of the day.
Yeah.
For me, towards the end, I had to find a city council member that was in charge of our district, and luckily, it was an election year. So taking that to her and saying, look, here's a platform on which you can stand, and it's a very worldwide topic right now. You're a woman, help me out here. This is in your backyard. Again, reaching out to somebody I felt like I should be able to trust and confiding in her to what I was seeing, knowing how it would affect her if she helped. That made it a little easier for her to go, maybe there is something here I could do. And she did, but the opportunity opened. So there again, there was another opportunity just from making it a connection with somebody I felt comfortable that I could trust.
Um, that's amazing. For people in leadership, because you have your own business, right? So
Mhm,
I see you as a leader. For people in leadership, ministry, or caregiving roles,
mhm.
how do they model courage without overexposing themselves or burning out then? How would you say that they
I
can
think,
do all of that without going the extra mile to just overexpose?
yeah, I think I was listening to a podcast. I can't off my head think of which one it was, but they brought up a real powerful point that rings true. If you can connect to somebody's heartstring, that's how you do it. You do it through compassion. Because if the person is not compassionate, then you know who you're dealing with, right? You know who you're dealing with. But if they have a heart, if you can tug on that string, it's an easier process than standing up with a bullhorn or just constantly shoving something at somebody or constantly just being in somebody's ear. If you can find that one thing that you can relate to, what for me it was the children. Nobody wanted to come down and help the adult women, nothing. But when I started sending pictures of an 8-year-old girl with a backpack, a little Hello Kitty backpack, going in, time stamped, and then at night still there or the next morning leaving, that got somebody's attention because nobody wants to see their child, in a situation like that. And it can happen to anybody. Kids go missing all the time. It's not just people who are being brought in out of country. It happens here. Walmart people get snatched. So it's not something that's foreign. This is a reality right here in our own backyard. And we had 5 schools, middle schools and elementary schools around us. So that heartstring, when I went to speak to the city councilwoman, and I said, look, these kids walk right by this shopping center every day, this office complex. And who's to say, that there's fine, upstanding people in the parking lot with alcohol waiting to go into the tug and rub. It's a crime of opportunity. You're inviting it in. So yeah, I think when you hit those compassionate notes in somebody's heart, it's an easier way. It's a shadow war. You can go in through the back door, and before you know it, they're taking it forward and you don't have to. You can kind of just sit back and be the supporter and testify to what you've seen, but you don't have to run the bus anymore. And that's you can get it to that point. Sometimes it takes a long time for me. I think from the time that I started really complaining to the time that it actually arrests were made and things were shut down was a little over 2 years. So it wasn't a quick fix,
Mhm.
but it was just taking the opportunity when it presented itself and doing it in a way that stirred compassion versus anger.
Mhm.
Because I was
Wow.
angry. I was hella angry. I'm telling you, when I saw those kids and I was starting to see some of the people in the parking lot that were waiting to go in, I got angry.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, you felt that there was a need to be met and you met the need and you trying to meet the need and got resistance, you were angered and that just tells me how compassionate you are and you're also resilient. You didn't stop at no and you didn't stop at okay, there's nobody doing anything about it. Why should I do it? You again, you put yourself in harm's way and you made such a difference.
Well, and it does come at a cost.
Yeah.
Whenever you do something, it comes at a cost. And you might not see it immediately. It might be 2 or 3 years down the road. For me, I sacrificed my practice. I had just gotten my practice up. I was, facilitating a practice of 4 other therapists. I had a clientele of 800 clients. I was taking referrals from various doctors in my community, so I had a very solid practice. And by the end of it, I had nothing. I had nothing. And my practice today still isn't what it could have been, but it's what I needed it to be because I would do it all over again if I saw somebody hurting that way. It's just not right. I would not have been able to have a successful practice and be flourishing knowing what was going on 2 doors down.
Yeah.
That's not me. So,
Yeah. Thank God for people like you with a heart like you
yeah,
have.
we're still
Um,
out here.
yeah. Yeah. Like they said, there are few good people that's left on this earth. And I think it's more than a few. If you really look hard enough, you'll see that they're
Well, and I
quite,
think that's
yeah.
what's wonderful about your platform, right? Is that you're helping expose that there are some good people out there that really do have a heart and compassion and the characteristics that make us human, the good human. And that's, I commend you for that because I think that you're going to be able to solidify us all together and kind of bring attention to the fact that, hey, there's still some good out here. It's not
Right.
all, death and carnage. It's you
Yeah,
can make a
absolutely.
difference and you can change things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And even on that note, as I'm speaking to others and hearing their stories, and they have recognized that it's important for them to use their voices and break the silence that was breaking them in so many different ways. And it's not just in corporate, but also in their lives, in their
Mhm.
everyday lives at home. It happened. And
Yeah.
speaking of that, that's a good segue into the next conversation or the next topic that I want to have, because you've also mentioned in the notes when we were communicating back and forth via email, you faced betrayal in both relationships and finances,
Mm.
and you
Yeah.
had to rebuild after betrayal. You had to use your voice and you had to step out in boldness to do that. What's the common thread between betrayal and silence, you think?
I think a lot of times we see the signs, but we don't acknowledge them and we don't act upon them. A lot of people are very, n- I don't want to say naive, but we're very, gosh, there was a term that a therapist once used, and now it's eluding me. It's something to the effect of agreeable and conscientious, is what she used.
Mm,
And so when you're overly agreeable to people, they know that you, A, either don't have boundaries or you're not very good at enforcing them. And when you're betrayed, a lot of times I have found personally that I have not set strong boundaries. I have not felt confident in setting those boundaries. And I certainly didn't feel confident about enforcing those boundaries. And it comes down to a self-worth. And so the lessons that I was taught in the betrayal was that I needed to have some self-worth. I was betraying myself, that I was being too agreeable and too conscientious about how I felt they were feeling. I was projecting how I would feel if somebody told me no, or how I would feel if I didn't do this like they asked me to. So I think we kind of have to look within and say, let's look at our boundaries and how we're enforcing these. If you're feeling betrayed, look to those first and see if there's any kind of tweaks that you can make. And having those honest conversations, I was never very confrontational. I didn't want to make someone feel bad because as an empath, I felt what they were feeling. So if I made them feel bad, I would feel twice as bad. So I wouldn't have those conversations. But as I grew to set boundaries, enforcing those boundaries required to have those conversations. And I felt like if I came from a place of love for myself, that gave me a little extra courage to do it with kindness. You don't have to be mean about it. You can just simply say, this is my boundary and I have to withhold this boundary here. And if that's not good for you, that's okay. You can move on. You can find somebody else, but it's not going to be me.
That's amazing. I love how you brought that into boundaries because that's a big, big thing for me. It's setting boundaries.
Yeah. It's
And
hard.
yeah, it's very hard to do, but once you do it, at least for me, once I set those boundaries, it is set, baby. It is set.
It's liberating though, isn't it? When you
It
enforce them
is.
and you feel good about yourself, right? You don't feel that betrayal. But if
Mhm.
they come at you and you don't have those strong boundaries, boy, do you feel like, wow, I just let myself down again.
Yeah, yeah. And those boundaries too, it's important because one, you don't have to feel like, oh, I'm going to stay silent and the silence is what's going to protect me.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you feel safe when you stay silent, right? You think, okay, this
Mhm.
is going to be my armor, it's going to guard me, it's going to protect me. Because when you're in that moment, when you're going through the betrayal, you're in it, and sometimes you also think, did I cause this betrayal? Did
Mhm.
I cause this on myself? So let me not say anything because maybe I contributed to this. And so I am going to, like you said, you're not confrontational. And
Mhm.
so in those moments, because I'm not either, and sometimes we play these things in our head thinking it's better to just stay silent because we're
Mhm.
keeping the peace, right? And
Yeah.
and then you realize that even doing that, you are still doing yourself a disservice. It doesn't help. It doesn't protect you. It only erodes you. Because eventually you realize it's still eating away because you want to say something, you want to do something about it, and you can't. You're just trying to keep the peace. And it to me is just like this cage that you put yourself in.
Yeah.
And it calls you to go down a path where this is not helping. And so you have to set those healthy boundaries
Mhm.
for yourself to
I
kind of then
agree.
say, right, to then say, well, now that I've set this boundary, I know what it is, whether it's going to be
Mhm.
me loving myself first, putting myself first, or
Mhm.
love at a distance,
Right. Right.
right?
And both are possible. Both you can do both. I think that for me, I had to look at not having parents. I only had life's lessons to teach me, opportunities that came along, and looking at everything like it was a lesson. And I remember in my marriage, I was in a marriage for 20 years. I think I spent 10 years trying to get out, trying to figure out, okay, I'm not happy. It must be me. I've got to change. Just don't make him angry. Just stay silent. Just don't make any waves. And that's when I started watching him and his actions and his words and acknowledging to myself how it made me feel, how I was feeling about it. And every time the opportunity would come up to say something, I wouldn't. And then I would get down on myself, like, why didn't you say something? You had the opportunity, he gave you the opportunity to say something, and you didn't. Next time, take the opportunity. And I kept pushing myself. Each time I would get a little bit bolder and reminding myself not to be ugly about it, but just to be firm in my conviction about I don't want to feel this. This isn't mine. This is yours. If you're having a bad day, go do something to, you know, get out that energy or something like that. Or don't direct your frustration at me. This has nothing to do with me. And speaking up in those times. And each time I did, and it didn't reflect negatively on me, it increased my courage to say something else and a little bit bolder each and every time. And so that circle kept coming around to where it was elevating the opportunities. And, you know, I was learning to trust myself to make those boundaries, enforce those boundaries. And, there are times that you have to stay silent, but there are also times that you don't. And those are the times that you have to good with. You have to take those opportunities and get to the next level, and it'll happen.
Yeah, and sometimes we lose the trust in ourselves though, right? In the moment when
Mhm.
we're not sure, and so we're hesitant and we stop and we pause and we don't trust our thought process, or we don't trust that the outcome is going to be what we're expecting. So
Right.
how do we rebuild the trust though, not just in people or the situation, but in our most so in ourselves, especially after the kind of pain that you endure.
Yeah, I think learning how to build your intuitiveness, those intuitive thoughts that you have about, is now the time to bring this up? Is now the time to say something? How is this really making me feel? Is this mine or is this somebody else's? Learning about your emotions and what they're saying to you and giving your body and your soul what it needs. I think that's when you start building the trust, that synchronicity between your heart and your brain. Your brain just says run, and your heart says, but he's still a good person. He still has the good parts. You know, I- I'm part of this. It's not just him, and you start talking yourself into that whole soup that keeps you bound to an unhealthy situation. For me, I had to rebuild the trust in how I was talking to myself. That this wasn't me. The only part that I had in it is that I was staying in it. And I had to continue to tell myself that, you know, give him the opportunity to heal. Give him the opportunity to see himself. Give him the mirror, reflect it back to him, show him what this looks and feels like. And when I did, I could see, where I would hit a chord and there would be recognition that he knew that I knew what was going on. And there were times where I would just get the whole, it's not going to make a difference. There's nothing you can say, there's nothing you can do. It's not going to go anywhere. So when you learn to read those cues within yourself about how you feel, what the situation's really presenting, and the other person and how they're acting, their behavior and their words, if those two are not in integrity, then you have to trust yourself. You can't trust anybody else. So you have to get your words and actions in alignment. And I think that was the key that really, really helped me get through that door was the integrity of my emotions.
Yeah, and you talked about the body and your mind. Now, you teach the nervous system resilience.
Mhm,
How can someone begin regulating their body when they're living in constant fear, or they have to always be on alert to kind of watch
mhm.
out, thinking, okay, I don't know what to expect. I don't know what's going to happen today. I don't
Mhm.
know w- what type of storm I
Is
am going
coming.
to face.
Mhm,
Exactly. What type of
yeah.
storm is going to happen? So, how does someone regulate their body in that moment?
I think, it comes down to awareness. You have to become aware of your breathing, aware of how you feel, those little heart palpitations, or if you're getting anxious before somebody gets home, or when they leave the room, you feel relief. Those are the things that you have to be aware of. And we go through so much of our lives unaware of we are in time and space, unaware of how we affect other people, cognitive decisions. We just are on autopilot. And I think it's very important that you become aware of how your body's reacting. We're like tuning forks. When we get to, interact with one another, either you're vibrating and you're really, really happy, or you're just kind of low and dense. And realizing those thoughts and who it is that makes us feel good and who it is that doesn't make us feel so good. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing or that that person's a bad person. It just means that you're just not in coherence. So, learning what it feels like to be in coherence with yourself and others, I think we have to just build the awareness first and foremost. And that does come down to the breathing, and it does come down to your thoughts and how you speak to yourself. And if you're taking time out for yourself, do you value yourself? How are you showing yourself that you value yourself? Those things are important. I think we take a lot of those things for granted.
Yeah, and you mentioned about self-worth as well earlier. Uh, and sometimes I try to be mindful of when I say this. Uh, and then sometimes I'm like, okay, well, this is me being bold and having the bold
Yes.
conversation about it.
Mhm.
Uh, because sometimes we are aware of things, but we, again, because of fear and intimidation,
Mhm.
we're intimidated,
Yeah.
we become unaware.
Mhm.
And then we find ourselves in those types of predicament where we're wondering, what do we do? We get into the fight or flight mode,
Mhm.
and then we get out of this alignment, right? We become misaligned. And you
Yes.
talked about that earlier. And I'm trying to understand a little bit deeper. I want to get a little bit deeper into how you connect that with your business, with your practice, and
Mhm.
how you've helped people in those situations to kind of become more aligned with themselves, more aware, and more at ease because it's not easy to do.
Right. Well, for me, there's always been somebody out there professing one system or another, and you can call it whatever you like. I call it signal story shift. So the signal is, what is your body telling you? Is it a physical symptom? Is your back hurting? Is your neck hurting? Do you have headaches? Are you clenching your teeth? Those are all physiological symptoms, but they are also signals of how you're feeling emotionally. So, listening to your body can help you gain a game plan on how to feel better emotionally by giving yourself the acknowledgement, hey, I don't feel good there. Why don't I feel good there? Story. What story
Mhm.
is causing that issue? Is it, that I'm tightening up every time I go to work? Is it I'm clenching my jaw every time that person walks in because I don't want to say something I might regret later? You know, those types of things are controllable if you listen to the story that's attached to them, because then you can make the shift. You
Mm.
can make the shift out of feeling those physical symptoms. You can go get a massage. You can go see a therapist. You can get a night guard for your clenching. You can do all sorts of things to make yourself feel better on the outside, but you can also help yourself on the inside by just acknowledging the story and changing the script, right? You change the way
Yeah.
you see it, you change the way you speak about it. This is not going to define me. I'm not going to let this keep me down. This is just a learning experience. Whatever you want to tie it to make that shift, that's how you can get out of feeling horrible physically and emotionally.
Wow, that is so powerful.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I
the
noticed when I was a I noticed when I
signal.
was a dental assistant that I clenched my teeth a lot
Ah,
in my marriage, and I didn't know I was doing it so much that I
wow.
actually loosened all of my teeth.
Ah,
I had done it for so long. I went in to get a cleaning one day, and the hygienist looked at me. She goes, "Kelly, I can't clean your teeth today." And I'm like, "What?" Like I'm usually in and out of here in 20 minutes. Like I've got the cleanest mouth in the world. She goes, "Your teeth are loose. Like you need to go get an evaluation by an orthodontist because you're going to end up losing your teeth." I was clenching that hard because I didn't want to speak out. I wanted to stay silent. And that
ah,
silence was going to cost me my teeth. And
oh
that's
my
the
god.
signal, right? That's the signal. The story was, what am I so, you know, about? Why am I holding in? And what am I holding in? And how can I address that? How can I make that shift?
Mm, wow, so powerful. Signal, story, and shift.
Yeah. That
I
was the
I have to remember this. Yes.
that was how I got myself through the hard times. Is I always look for that signal. It's like a clue. Okay, what is this? And then I dive deeper. Okay, what stories behind it? then I can make the shift.
Mm. I often say, and I encourage and advise, or when I used to do counseling in the past, I would share this that when you're going through emotional pain and trauma and you don't know how to process that, it's always best to change your environment in some way if you can, or just shift your focus to something
Mm-hmm.
else. The shift
Right.
is so important because when you're able to do that, to me that's a power move, right?
Yeah.
It's a bold move in the sense that you are making that conscious decision that you're in this mode right now and it's not your happy place. You don't want to be there. And the
Hmm.
only way for you to get out of it is for you to shift your thinking, shift your mindset, shift how you go down the path of processing, right? Because it starts with a thought of something is happening to you. You're watching something about to unfold and you can choose to, especially if it's not a good thing, you can choose to continue to follow that and let that thought lead into something greater, or you can
Hmm.
immediately shift and say, okay, fine, this is not where I want to be, so let me excuse myself or shift that mindset or the visual to something different to help you to be more centered.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I totally agree. When I finally had made up my mind that I was going to end my marriage and I needed to gather strength and I needed to feel better about and more confident about what I was doing because I knew if I got to a certain point, he would, you know, hold me back and you just keep pushing me back to where I couldn't get to that door. So finally, I decided I'm going to start working out. I'm going to get in the best physical shape of my life. It gave me a different focus to focus all my anxiousness and my fear and my silence. I could sing and get on the treadmill and I could, do my humming and I could just really build up my body. And in doing that, I felt stronger. I was stronger. And so that really helped just shifting my focus, like you say, into something more positive, changing my environment. I minimalized everything. It was just about eat, sleep, and workout, eat, sleep, and workout. And so that really gave me a regimen. It gave me structure. It gave me strength. And sometimes just changing your environment and changing your lifestyle, your daily life schedule. Sometimes those little changes will get you to the finish line. And I was in so much better shape.
You're right. You become better for it when you make those
Yeah,
type of
yeah.
conscious decisions to change. Yeah.
Well, I was doing something for me and it was starting to show, with every pair of pants that I put on that fit a little bit better. I was like, I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer.
I
So
love it.
it felt good. It was the feely goods instead of
Yeah.
feeling so bad.
I love it. I love it. After being married for such a long time, I have to confess that for me, I thought for folks who stay in marriages for that long period of time and then decide to leave, I can't imagine staying through something that long. I've stayed in the longest marriage I've had was 10 years, just being married. We've been together longer, a lot longer than 10 years, but we were married for 10 years. And it was very difficult for me to walk away thinking, okay, I've spent so much time in this. It's been 10 years. But I didn't just walk away. Uh, I listened again to, because I'm a very spiritual person, and I prayed, Lord, you got to get me out like
Yeah,
5 years
yeah.
earlier. And then the spirit said, no, I heard clearly. It was like an audible voice because I was
Mm.
praying one morning and I heard, no, not yet. You have 10 years. And I didn't know what that meant.
Oh, wow.
And I questioned, like I mentioned earlier, with you off air. Like I question to God, like, Lord, why? Why can't I? You see what I'm going through. Why
Right.
not? Why not now? And I heard it again. I heard it two more times after, and to me, that was enough confirmation to stay your ground. I've got
Yeah.
this.
Right.
Uh, and so I stayed. And when everything unraveled, I didn't even think about the number until everything unraveled and the voice came back. Remember, I told you 10, you have 10 years?
Oh, I got chills. Chills.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
and I couldn't believe it, and I was like, "Oh my lord." So this is what happened when you are obedient. It was
Mhm.
and it wasn't how I was expecting because I thought it would never end, Kelly.
Mhm. Mm.
But I stayed because God told me to stay for
Yeah.
the 10 years, and after the 10 years, everything just came how I was not expecting it to happen. But my point in this is, it's not easy to walk away when you've invested your time, your effort, and you've put so much time into trusting yourself, rebuilding trust, trying,
Right.
you're breaking the silence, you're being bold, you're doing everything that you possibly can do. But it comes a time when you have to stand up and say, have I been bold enough? Have I really been staying silent just to keep the peace? What is that costing me though? Right?
Mhm.
So whether it's 10 years, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 years later, if at that time you find your voice, then hallelujah.
Yeah,
Right?
it's
It's the time
time.
that you find your voice. It's time,
Mhm.
regardless of the time.
Mhm.
And before, I would say, which is what I was about to say earlier, when I have to admit, I used to say, if you stay that long, why bother leaving? But then
You're
I
right.
understood
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the I think psychologists call it the sunk cost fallacy, where you feel like you've invested so much of your time and money and effort into this thing, and I don't want to start over. And what's on the outside for me? I know a lot of women, especially in my age group, they didn't work, so their husband was their provider. And what am I going to do? Fortunately for me, I did not have children I had to consider, so I stayed because I didn't have anything else. And he was my knight in shining armor. He was going to protect me and keep me safe and all of this stuff. So it was easy for me to stay. It was harder to leave. So I commend the women and to get them and their children out of those situations. But it's the whole mindset of what's going to happen to me. I don't know of a life without so and so, and I can't imagine a life without him. And it's those things that we tell ourselves that keep us stuck. And that's why it's very important to listen to how you're talking to yourself. It's not just somebody else's input. You have the right to listen to your own, and thank gosh you did hear God. I heard him on multiple occasions saying, you're never gonna be happy if you're stuck with the one that's making you unhappy.
Mhm.
And I look at everything like lessons, and, repeatedly he would say, "Have you learned your lesson yet? How about now? How about
Wow.
now? Now?" What's it gonna take? And so listening to your inner self, listening to God, listening to whoever it is that you feel is your divine, you have to propel yourself, and sometimes you need courage and encouragement from something outside yourself. And I
Yeah.
think it's very important for somebody to develop that part of them, that faith-based part, and to
Yeah.
be obedient to it, because that can be a great structure that can hold you up when you're not feeling strong.
Mhm. Mhm. And obedience is better than sacrifice.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Uh,
And
if you
suffering,
could
it's a lot better
Yeah.
than suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So true. If you could leave one message with our listeners about courage and healing, what would it be?
I think make better choices if you want better changes,
Mm,
and start with yourself. Start with the things that make you feel safe. Trust and reach out to those around you. The change can happen, but it comes with intention. You have to want to make that change. No one's going to come in and make it for you. So, just dedicate better choices to better changes. When those opportunities present, take them.
Absolutely. Wow. What truth are you living by that you once resisted?
One truth. I would say it had to do with self-worth, that I am valuable, that I am of value, not only to the world, to my clients, to my family, but to myself. You know, I matter. I have a voice. I have a right to be happy. I have a right to be here. And I think for a long time, I didn't feel that way. I felt like I had to live constantly in gratitude for other people, grateful for them, but they never had to really show gratitude for me. Like I wasn't valuing what I was bringing to the table. And now I feel that I have that. I have something to offer. I'm a little bit older, hopefully a little bit wiser. So I think that I'm starting to know my value a little bit more and living in that integrity of words and actions.
Mhm. Wow. Kelly, thank you for that. You mentioned, I think we were off air when we're talking, and no, actually, we're on air. We're talking about your practice is not what it used to be.
Hmm.
So I want to give you the opportunity to, if you want to share a little bit more about your practice and how can people reach you, reach out to you, to help support you and to rebuild,
Oh,
how
well,
can they
thank
reach you?
you. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm transitioning out of my hands-on body work business. I've been doing it 30 years, so the body's starting to slow down a little bit. So I'm starting to try to build and reach out and connect people that need encouragement, that need to learn how to trust their intuition and how to tap into that inner strength and to help them bring their words and alignments into or their words and actions into alignment. And so, I've written some books about the human trafficking that I donate to human trafficking organizations. And that's a way that's available on Amazon. It's called Disposable Souls. I've also written another book that's called A Healer's Guide to the Universe, which helps, you figure out, kind of get a game plan about where you're at emotionally with signal, story, and shift. And then I also have my podcast that's available, and that teaches you more of a scientific reason about why you're feeling what you're feeling. There's actually a scientific reason behind it. It's not just made up, it's not just in your head, but I think that it sheds light on those who think it's just nothing. So right now I'm just trying to get the word out and connect with people on social media. So I'm on all the major social media plans, YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. Right now, I'm doing a lot on LinkedIn, collaborating with other professionals in my realm. So that's interesting.
Good, good. So they can just simply go and connect with you on LinkedIn if they're on LinkedIn or
LinkedIn, or they
okay,
can go
okay.
to my website, kellybest.com.
Okay, good.
That way you can find everything on there about me, probably some stuff that you don't want to know, but it's on there. You can find it. But I would love to reach out and connect with people, even if it's, just to give words of encouragement. I send out what I call whispers of light, which is just little voice notes for people who are in that dark place that need that encouragement, a daily affirmation about, being courageous and being strong, and you can do this. You can get to the door and, listen to your body. What's it saying? How to make the shift. I can do those in little voice notes that, don't cost a lot so that people can afford them. My currency is usually compassion. So I'm here if anybody wants to reach out. I'd love to meet with you.
Absolutely. Wow. Such a beautiful soul, beautiful voice, beautiful woman, beautiful person.
Oh,
Kelly,
thank
I
you.
love your heart. I love your uh just your spirit, your compassion. It comes through to
Mm,
me and I just want to send you nothing but best wishes in all your endeavors as you rebuild. Thank you so much for sharing today. Thank you for showing us that boldness isn't about noise, it's about clarity. You
Yes.
reminded us earlier that the real shift begins not when we shout out louder, but when we
Yeah.
listen deeper. You talked about that, our mind and our bodies, and also choosing truth and move forward with integrity. And your
Yes.
stories, oh my gosh, they prove that courage doesn't always roar, right? Like a lion doesn't roar, but
Yes.
sometimes it whispers.
Hmm.
And when it whispers, we have to listen. We have to listen to our inner beings, our inner selves, and our intuition. So
Yes.
thank you so much for all that you've shared with our viewers or listeners today. And please, anyone, everyone who's listening, uh, like Kelly says, please reach out to her, and
Yes.
don't be afraid to speak up and open your voice, and make that small bold step that we talked about earlier. You'll be
Yes.
better
Yes.
for it.
Yes. Be a safe space and create a safe space. That's
Yeah.
what I'm here for. So I
Okay.
appreciate your time and your attention and giving me this opportunity. And I wish
Absolutely.
you all the best with your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. No, hang on. Don't hang up. Let
I'm not
me
going
close this
anywhere.
out.
I'm not touching anything.